There's a moment, and most people only get one if they're lucky, when a stranger says something so honest it cracks something open in your chest. Not because it's beautiful, not because it's poetic, but because it's true in the way that only desperate people are true. He wasn't asking for love. She wasn't looking for company. But the Arizona frontier in 1887 didn't care much about what people were looking for. It had a way of taking two bruised, half-finished human beings and pressing them together the way you press a wound, hard enough that the edges eventually stop bleeding and start, slowly, terribly, becoming one thing. I was there when he said it. I was standing close enough to smell the trail dust on his coat and the wood smoke in her hair. I'm not a romantic man. I keep a logbook. I write down weather and water levels and the price of grain at the Tucson depot. I am not the kind of man who writes down things people say. But I wrote that down, because when he said it, she didn't answer with words. She just looked at him for a long moment, this woman who had buried a husband and two children and still kept her front porch swept, and something moved behind her eyes that I'd never seen in anyone before. I still don't have a word for it. Maybe that's why I'm still writing. The day Eli Voss rode into Canyon Dulce, I almost didn't notice him. That's the honest truth of it, and I've been honest in this log since 1879 when old Taggart at the Yuma Depot told me that a man who lies in his ledger eventually lies in his life, and I've held that like a commandment ever since. So, honest, I almost didn't see him. I was sitting on the porch of Dunbar's trading post, eating a piece of cornbread that had the texture of saddle leather and making a note about the creek levels, down 3 inches from last week, worrisome for the coming August, when a horse and rider came up the south trace at the kind of pace that tells you the man isn't in a hurry because he has somewhere important to be. He was in a hurry because he was running out of momentum. There's a difference. I've seen enough trail-broke men to know it. That particular gait, slow, deliberate, preserving, is the gait of a man who doesn't know what happens when he stops. The horse was a grulla, dusty gray Roman nose, one white sock on the left rear. Good horse. The kind of horse a man doesn't sell unless he's truly desperate, which meant Eli Voss was not yet truly desperate, which was the first thing I noted about him. He still had something left. He dismounted at the trough, didn't tie the horse, just let the reins drop and the grulla drank, and Eli stood there with one hand on the saddle horn, not for support, but like he needed something to hold on to while the world stopped moving. His hat was a dark brown Stetson, sweat-ringed so many times the crown had developed a salt-tide line like a geological stratum. You could have read the man's last 6 months in that hat the way you read rock formations. Dry spell, wet spell, another dry spell, push. I didn't speak to him right away. I have a rule about trail-broke men. You give them 10 minutes with the water and the quiet before you say anything at all. It's a courtesy most people have forgotten in the territories, but I consider it sacred as a handshake. He used 9 of those minutes staring at the mountains. The Rincons were purple that afternoon, cloud shadows walking across the face of them slow and enormous, the way God moves when he isn't in a hurry. Eli watched them with the expression of a man who has been in flat country for a long time and had almost forgotten that the earth went up. There was something tender in it. Something almost childlike. I looked away because it felt too private. On the 10th minute, he turned and saw me. "You the man at the trading post?" he asked. "I'm a man at the trading post," I said. "Dunbar's the man who owns it. He's inside arguing with his conscience about whether to charge a widow woman fair price for salt pork." Eli looked at the door. "Which way's that argument going?" "Same way it always does. Conscience is losing, but it's putting up a fight." A small thing moved across his face. Not quite a smile. More like the ghost of one, the shadow a smile casts when the smile itself is too tired to show up. He came up the porch steps and sat on the bench opposite me without asking permission, which I respected. A man who asks permission to sit down is a man who's been beaten too many times. "Eli Voss," he said. "Caleb Prout," I closed my logbook. "You come up from Benson." "Lordsburg, before that, Deming, before that." He paused. Did something with his jaw like he was tasting a word and finding it too bitter to spit out. "Before that, somewhere I don't name anymore." I wrote nothing down, but I noted it. There are men who don't name places because those places are attached to shame, and there are men who don't name places because those places are attached to grief. The first kind have a tightness around the eyes. The second kind have a tightness around the mouth, like they're holding the name in by physical force. Eli's tightness was around his mouth. Grief, then. You looking for work? I asked. I'm looking for, he stopped, started again. I'm not sure what I'm looking for exactly, that's the honest answer. Honest answers are harder to give than people admit, I said. Yes, he said, they are. He bought 3 days' worth of provisions from Dunbar, jerky, coffee, a tin of peaches, and paid fare in coin without negotiating, which told me he wasn't destitute yet. And he camped that night on the flat ground east of the post where travelers sometimes stayed when the weather was coming in from the south. I went back to my log. August 3rd, creek at Arroyo Salado down 3.2 inches from last measure. Freight delayed from Tucson, axle trouble reported at the pass. One traveler arrived from Lordsburg direction. Grulla horse, fair provisions. Name Eli Voss, status unclear. I always put a status, it's a habit. Most people fall into one of 4 categories in my log, passing through, seeking work, settling, or trouble. I left Eli's blank, which I almost never do. He was still there 4 days later. I found him on the second morning sitting at the creek with a fishing line in the water and a small fire going, and I sat down because I wanted to know why a man with a good horse and enough coin for provisions had decided to remain in a place with nothing to offer. Cañon Dulce was not a town. It was a trading post, 6 homesteads, a dry goods operation that Dunbar ran on the side, and a reputation for having the worst mosquitoes in the territory. It was not a destination. What's keeping you? I asked. He was quiet for long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, there's a homestead east of here, about 3 miles, woman running it alone. Nora Beckett, I said. You know her? Know of her, she was Nora Harlan before. Her husband James died of fever 2 winters back. Her children, 2 of them, a boy of 8 and a girl of 5, went the same week. Same fever, different days. I paused. I always paused when I said that part. It was the kind of fact that needed space around it. She stayed. Most people said she wouldn't, but she stayed, and she's been working that homestead alone since February of '85. Eli was looking at the creek. The line twitched. He didn't react. How is she doing? He said. Not a question exactly. She's doing, I said. Whether she's doing well, that's a different conversation. He pulled the line in. Small catfish, barely worth the keeping. He looked at it for a moment with a kind of impersonal consideration, then unhooked it carefully and put it back. I rode past her place yesterday, he said. There was a fence section down on the east pasture and she was trying to set a post by herself. The ground's hard out there this time of year, real hard. She was hitting that post driver with everything she had and the post wasn't going anywhere and she just... He stopped. She just kept going, past the point where a person keeps going. I thought about Nora Beckett setting fence posts alone in the August heat, and I felt something cold move through me that wasn't the weather. You offered to help, I asked. I rode down, asked if she needed a hand. Something careful moved through his voice. She looked at me like I was a threat. She looks at most men that way. I told her I wasn't selling anything or asking for anything, that I'd seen the fence was down and I had time. He picked up a small stone, turned it in his fingers. She said she didn't take charity. She wouldn't. I said it wasn't charity. I said I was just a man with nothing to do who'd rather be useful than not. He paused. She let me help. That's, I consider, the right word. That's more than most people get. He set the post. I found this out later from Sam Ellery, who ran the nearest working cattle operation and had a habit of knowing everything that happened within 10 miles of his property. Sam said he'd ridden that way late afternoon and seen Eli Voss setting fence posts with Nora Beckett's post driver while she held the posts level, and neither of them was talking, and it was the most companionable silence he'd seen between 2 strangers in years. She made him coffee, Sam told me. On the porch. He sat on the step, not in a chair, mind you, on the step, and they drank coffee and looked at the mountains, and then he left. He say anything. Nothing Sam could hear, Sam said. But she watched him ride out, stood on that porch and watched him all the way to the ridge, and Sam said he shook his head. Sam said she didn't go inside until she couldn't see him anymore. I wrote that down in my log that night. Not the fence post, not the coffee, just she watched him to the ridge. I introduced myself to Nora Beckett properly on a Thursday. I'd met her before, in the way you meet everyone in a place this small, at Dunbar's, at the occasional community gathering that passed for civilization out here. Once at the doctor in Benson when I'd gone in for a bad tooth, and she'd been coming out with a list of medicines that told a story of a long, grinding winter. But we'd never spoken at length. She was not what people said when they described her. People said tough and hard and weathered, and those things were true the way the bark of a tree is tough and hard and weathered, but bark is not what a tree is. What Nora Beckett was someone who had been required to become harder than she ever expected to become. And she had done it, and she was still doing it. And underneath it, there was something that hadn't hardened at all, something that was still startlingly, uncomfortably alive. She had dark hair she kept in a braid, hands that were chapped from work and water, eyes that were, I don't know how to describe this except accurately, eyes that were very still. Not cold, still, the way still water is still. There's depth in still water that moving water doesn't have. I told her I was the depot correspondent. She nodded, she knew. The man who stayed, she said. Eli Voss, he's a friend of yours. Not exactly, I said. I've known him 6 days. That's the same as a friend out here. Fair enough, I said. He seems like a decent man. She looked at the horizon. That was her habit, I learned later. When something came at her from the side, something she wasn't sure how to handle, she looked at the horizon the way a sailor looks at the sea. Like distance was a thing she could calculate. He came back, she said. Yesterday, fixed the gate on the barn. I didn't ask him to. I came out in the morning and the gate was hanging right. Something moved in her voice. I don't know how he knew it needed fixing. He only saw it for a minute the other day. He noticed, I said. Yes, she said. He noticed. The way she said noticed, with a kind of wondering attention, the way a person says a word they'd forgotten they knew, told me more than she probably intended. I went back to Eli that evening. He was at the creek again, not fishing this time, just sitting with a cup of coffee and the sound of the water. The Rincons were going orange and deep red in the last of the sun, and the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in an hour the way it does out here in August, fast and merciful, like the day apologizing. She noticed the gate, I said. He looked into his coffee. Good. You're not going to tell me why you did it. No. You're not going to tell me what you're doing here, either. Caleb, he said my name quietly, not as a rebuke. More like he was handing it back to me, saying, you know better than to ask outright. And he was right. I did know better. I asked anyway because that's the other thing I am beside a log keeper. I am a man who cannot stand not knowing, which is a considerable personal failing, and I'm aware of it. I sat down. The creek ran over the stones, and the sound of it was the sound the world makes when it's not trying to hurt you for a minute. I had a place, Eli said eventually. In Colorado, small spread, not much, 40 acres, a few cattle, a house I built myself out of timber I cut from a stand of pine on the northern edge of the property. He stopped. I had a wife, Eleanor, we were. He stopped again longer. We were a good team. The kind of people who made the other person better just by being nearby. You know that kind. I know of it, I said. I've been looking for it myself. She died 3 years ago this coming October, childbed fever, the child. He set the cup down carefully like it was something fragile. The child was a boy. He didn't survive the week. He was quiet for a moment. I stayed on the place for a year and a half, trying to, his hands moved, trying to maintain the shape of the life we'd planned, but a life that was planned for 2 doesn't fit 1 man. The rooms were wrong. The table was wrong. The whole architecture of the thing was wrong. He looked at me. Do you understand what I mean by that? Yes, I said, and I did. I sold the cattle first, then the timber rights. Then this past spring, the land itself. He picked up his coffee again. And I've been, he made a gesture with his free hand, not quite helpless, more like factual, moving since then, not looking for anything particular, just moving. The fire popped. A coyote called somewhere on the eastern ridge, long and lonesome, and another answered from somewhere in the dark. Until now, I said carefully. He looked at the embers. Something about this place, he said. Something about, he stopped, started over. She's holding something together out there, Caleb, something she maybe shouldn't be holding alone, and he looked at his hands. I am a man who knows how to hold things. That's about the only skill I've got left. I didn't say anything. I wrote it down later, when I was back at Dunbar's by the lamp. A man who knows how to hold things, looking for something that needs holding. Then I wrote status, settling maybe. And I crossed out the maybe. The first time Eli and Nora spoke, really spoke, not the careful functional exchange of people managing proximity, was on a Sunday afternoon in the third week of August. And I was there because I had no particular excuse to be anywhere else, and Dunbar had asked me to run a parcel out to Nora's homestead. I rode up and found Eli there already, sitting on the porch step again. His step, I had begun to think of it, the leftmost one, with his hat beside him and a cup of coffee in his hands. And Nora was in the other chair, also with coffee, and they were in the middle of a conversation that had clearly been going for some time. I stayed at the gate and listened. "Don't know what you're waiting for," Nora was saying, not unkindly, matter of fact, the way she said most things. "You've been here 3 weeks. You fixed more on this homestead than some men would do in a season. You haven't asked anything in return." "I don't want anything in return," Eli said. "That's what concerns me." He looked at her. "Why?" "Because men who want nothing are either lying or broken." A long pause. "The kind that has weight." "Maybe both," Eli said. She studied him, that still water gaze. He didn't look away from it, which was, I'd come to understand, unusual. Most people looked away from Nora Beckett's direct attention. It had a quality of seeing things. "Tell me what you are," she said, not a demand, a request. Said the way you ask for water when you've been thirsty a long time, without pretense, without games. And Eli Voss, sitting on the second step of Nora Beckett's porch with a coffee cup in his hands, and the August light coming long and gold through the cottonwoods, said the thing I'd been trying to understand about him for 3 weeks. "I'm a man who lost the architecture," he said, the shape of the life he was building. "Lost the person it was built for." His voice was steady, careful, like a man walking ice. "And I've been moving since, trying not to stop, because stopping means seeing how," he paused, "how much space there is where she used to be." Nora was very still. "I rode past your fence," he said, "and I saw you setting that post, and I thought that woman is holding something together, something real and hard and necessary. And I wanted," his voice tightened almost imperceptibly, "I wanted to help, not because I expected anything, just because I still know how to, and I'd almost forgotten that." Nora looked at her coffee cup. "James has been gone 2 years, she said. "My children," she stopped. "I don't talk about my children." "You don't have to." "I know," she looked up. "I'm telling you I don't talk about them, so you understand what I mean when I say I've been setting my own fence posts for 2 years, Eli. I've learned to do it. I'm not in need of rescuing." "I know that," he said. "That's not what I'm offering." "Then what are you offering?" And there it was, the question, direct as a well-sunk post. He thought about it for a long moment. Genuinely thought, which I respected. He didn't reach for a ready answer, didn't give her the easy thing. He turned the question over like he was looking for the true answer, the way you look for a true edge on a blade. "Company," he said finally. "Honest company. From someone who also knows what it's like to be in a place built for more people than are currently in it." She looked at him. He held her gaze. "And maybe," he said, and his voice was very quiet, so quiet I almost didn't catch it from the gate, "the chance to be useful to something that matters, to someone who deserves to not do everything alone." The cottonwood leaves moved. The sun was going west and the shadows were getting long. "That's a careful answer," she said. "It's an honest one." She was quiet for a while, long enough that I was starting to think the conversation was over, that she was going to retreat into that place she had, that careful inner distance she kept between herself and anything that might matter too much. Then she said, "You need somewhere to call home." Not accusing, just naming it. "Yes," he said quietly, without shame. She nodded slowly. And then she said, and this was the thing I wrote down that night in the biggest letters I'd used in the log since 1882, she said, "I need someone to share this life with. The real one, not the pretend it's fine one." He looked at her, something shifted in his face. Not relief exactly, more like recognition. The look of a man who has been speaking a language no one else spoke and has finally heard a reply in it. "That sounds like a deal worth considering," he said. "It's not a deal," she said. "It's a conversation, they're different." "Yes," he said, "they are." I turned my horse around and rode back to Dunbar's with the parcel still in my saddlebag. Forgot to deliver it entirely. Wrote in my log that night, "Something is beginning, God help them both." Narrated by Caleb Prout, freight rider, depot correspondent, reluctant witness to other people's lives. September came and changed everything the way seasons do, not all at once, but in accumulations so gradual you miss each individual moment, and then one morning you look up, and the world has become something different while you weren't watching. The mornings were cooler. The creek came up 1.5 inches, which I noted with relief. The freight from Tucson resumed after the axle delay. Dunbar got a new shipment of cloth and sold half of it to Nora Beckett, which was the first time she'd bought fabric for anything other than practical use since her husband died, and Dunbar told me about it with the air of a man reporting a small miracle. Eli Voss had not left. He was sleeping in the small structure behind Dunbar's that had been a tack room and was now, by general agreement and absolutely no official arrangement, something like a bunk room for men who needed a place, but weren't yet local enough to be offered anything better. He paid Dunbar in work, repair, and maintenance, some freight handling, and he rode out to Nora's homestead 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes at her asking and sometimes at his own initiative when he'd noticed something from the road that needed attention. They had not, and I want to be precise here because I'm a log keeper and precision is a value, they had not become anything that had a name yet. What they had was something previous to a name, a careful, watchful proximity. The kind that people who have been badly hurt maintain between themselves and anything they want. You get close enough to see it clearly. You don't get close enough to lose it. I understood this because I had, years ago, been close to a woman in Santa Fe for nearly 8 months without either of us admitting what we were doing, until one of us moved on her, east to family, to a life that had other claims on it, and I was left with the particular grief of something that was never named and so could never quite be mourned. I've kept a careful log of my own emotional cowardice ever since, which is the other thing I use this ledger for, though I deny it if asked. So I watched Eli and Nora with the attention of a man who knows how easily these things go wrong. The problem, and there was a problem, there always is, announced itself on a Saturday in early September when a man named Gordon Proul rode into Canyon Dulce with 2 companions and a business proposition. Proul ran cattle on a large operation south of Benson. Not a rancher in the honest sense, more a man who had acquired land the way water acquires low ground, by filling whatever space was adjacent and vulnerable. He had, over the past 3 years, bought out 4 neighboring homesteads when their owners hit difficulty. He bought them cheap and consolidated them and expanded his cattle operation, and every transaction had been, technically, legal, and everyone involved had, technically, agreed to terms, and not one of those people had felt afterward that they'd come out ahead. He rode up to Nora's gate on a Saturday morning when I happened to be there helping Eli reseal the barn roof. It had developed a leak over the summer that would turn murderous in the fall rains, and he sat on his horse and looked at the property with the proprietary attention of a man who has already calculated what he intends to own. "Mrs. Beckett," he said, "I've been meaning to come speak with you about your water rights." Nora came out of the house and stood on the porch and looked at him with her still-water eyes and said, "Mr. Proul, I know why you're here. The answer is no." Proul smiled. He had the kind of smile that had been engineered to be reassuring and had missed by a precise, calibrated inch. "You haven't heard my offer." "I don't need to hear your offer. This property isn't for sale, the water rights aren't for sale, the fence posts aren't for sale, the particular patch of dirt under your horse's left hoof isn't for sale." She held his gaze. "No." Proul's smile didn't change. "That's a woman running a homestead alone," he said. "Winter coming on, things happen out here, hard seasons, equipment failures. The price I'm offering today won't be the price I'm offering in February, I can promise you that." There was a silence. Eli came down off the barn roof. He didn't hurry. He climbed down the ladder at the same pace he'd climbed up, which was deliberate and easy and completely unhurried. And he walked around the side of the barn and came through the gate and stood beside Nora's porch step, the left one, and looked up at Gordon Proul with an expression I'd never seen on him before. It was not anger. Anger is loud, usually, or at least active. It moves toward things. What was on Eli's face was something quieter and much, much older. A kind of absolute stillness that said, "I have nothing left to lose, and you should think about what that means." "She said no," Eli said. Proul looked at him, calculating the situation. "I don't believe I was speaking to you." "No," Eli agreed. You were speaking at her. There's a difference. He hooked his thumbs in his belt and looked up at Proul with that still expression. I heard a threat in there about things happening in hard seasons. I want to be clear that I heard it. Proul's two companions shifted in their saddles. Not menacingly, more the way men shift when they're waiting to see which way this goes. I'm making a business proposition, Proul said, colder now. Then come back with a different tone, Eli said. And without the company, business propositions don't need an audience. Proul looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Nora. Then he turned his horse and rode out with his two men behind him, and the sound of their departure was the sound of a conversation that was not finished, only paused. I let out a breath I'd been holding and didn't know it. Nora was looking at Eli, something in her face that I was beginning to learn how to read, a particular quality of her stillness that meant she was moved but would not yet say so. Thank you, she said. He'll come back, Eli said. I know. With more leverage, or more men, probably both. I know that too. She looked at the gate where Proul had been. I've been expecting it since spring. He bought out the Harden place in April. The Harden place is east of me. He's been circling. Eli nodded. He looked at the property, the house, the barn, the pasture, the creek line to the northeast, with the careful, comprehensive attention of a man who is assessing defenses. We should talk, he said. Yes, she said. Come inside. I stayed on the barn roof. I am not proud of this, but I stayed on the barn roof, which offered excellent acoustic properties, and I made no particular noise, and I listened. He can hurt you financially, Eli said. He doesn't have to threaten anything physical. He just waits. Waits until a bad year or a bad season or until something breaks that you can't repair alone, and then he shows up with cash and a contract, and your choices are 2 instead of 10. I know how it works, Nora said. James knew it too. We talked about it, about what to do if one of us was alone and Proul started circling. A pause. We didn't finish that conversation. Something in the way she said that, we didn't finish that conversation, had an entire universe of loss inside it. The conversations you don't finish, the plans that have the wrong number of people in them. What would you have decided, Eli asked, if you'd finished it? James would have said, she stopped. James would have said we needed a partner, another set of hands, another pair of eyes on the operation, someone with a stake in the land itself. Her voice was careful. He wasn't romantic about it. He was practical. He would have said, find someone whose survival is attached to this place the same as ours, and the problem solves itself. Quiet. And what would you have said? Eli asked. I would have said he was right. Her voice dropped just slightly. I would have said, find someone who also needs this place to matter. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. Nora, he stopped himself, tried again. I'm not asking for anything that you're not ready to offer. I want to be clear about that. I know you're not. But I want to be useful, not just for repairs. He paused, and I heard him searching for the right word with the care of a man who knows the wrong word could break something. For keeping this place alive, as whatever shape that takes. What shape are you proposing? She asked, direct as always. And he said, and I heard this clearly because the wind had died and the afternoon was very still. I'm proposing that I stay through winter, and we see, he paused. We see what this is, what it could be, without rushing it or naming it before it's ready to be named. What about what you want? She said, not combative. Genuinely asking. I want, he stopped, a long pause. I want to stop moving. I want to be somewhere that needs me to be there. I want. His voice changed, got quieter. I want to not feel the shape of a leaner in every room, a beat. I feel like I'm betraying her by saying that. You're not, Nora said, firm, immediate. How do you know? Because I feel the same way about James every time I let myself want something again. Quiet. And I've decided I have to keep deciding every day that they would not have wanted us to stop wanting, stop building. Something cracked in her voice briefly, and then it steadied. They would have hated it. James would have hated it. He was the least interested in dying of anyone I've ever known. Even when he was dying. Eli said nothing for a moment. Then he said, Alina was the same. Yes, Nora said. Then maybe, he stopped. Maybe, she said. I heard the sound of someone, I couldn't tell who, crossing the floor, and then a long silence that wasn't empty, the kind of silence that's full. I came down off the barn roof, carefully, made some noise on the ladder so they'd hear me. When I came around the side of the house, Nora was on the porch alone with 2 cups of coffee, and Eli was coming out of the house with a look on his face like a man who has set something down that he's been carrying for a very long time, and is uncertain, in its absence, how to hold himself upright. They sat on the porch. I rode home. October was when things got complicated. October was when the nature of the situation, its costs, its risks, its demands, stopped being abstract and started being daily and particular and heavy. It began with the water. Pruill filed a legal challenge to Nora's creek access in the 2nd week of October. He claimed a prior rights dispute that had apparently been dormant since before James Beckett bought the property, and he hired a lawyer from Tucson who specialized in the kind of argument that transforms the obvious into the unclear, the settled into the contested. The letter from the territorial court arrived on a Wednesday, and Nora brought it to me because I was the person in Canyon Dulce most likely to have encountered legal documents before. I read it twice. "This is legitimate," I said, "not necessarily valid, but legitimately filed. He's done his research." Nora sat across from me at Dunbar's counter, and she was very still and very pale. Not frightened. Nora Beckett was not a person who frightened easily, which is different from saying she wasn't afraid, and I'm precise about that distinction. She was afraid in the way that anyone would be when something they've held together through sheer will was being tested from a direction they hadn't defended. But frightened, seized by it, paralyzed, no. "What does it mean practically?" she asked. "It means you need to respond, formally and soon." I set the document down. "And it means Pruill is done waiting." Eli arrived at Dunbar's 20 minutes later, because word traveled fast in Canyon Dulce and Sam Ellery had apparently told everyone with ears. He came through the door with the specific energy of a man who has decided what he intends to do and is organizing the details. He sat down, read the document I handed him, read it again, and then put it flat on the counter. "He has a lawyer," he said. "We need a better one." Nora said. He looked at her steadily. "Yes." She held his gaze. Something passed between them, not argument, not agreement exactly. A reckoning. The kind where 2 people look at each other and decide whether they're actually in the same thing or only adjacent to it. "Eli," she said quietly, "this is my fight." "I know that." "Then, it's also mine," he said. "If I stay, he paused. "If we decide that this is real, then it's mine too." He looked at his hands on the counter. "I have money from the Colorado sale. I've been waiting for something worth spending it on." He looked up. "This is worth it." "I can't let you." "You're not letting me," he said. "I'm choosing to." Something moved in his voice. "That's the difference between charity and partnership. Charity is given, partnership is chosen." He held her gaze. "I'm choosing." Nora was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "If we do this, if we fight this, there's no undoing it. You understand that? If we fight this together, we're in it. Legally, practically, publicly. People will know you're here. People will know you've put money into this property. Your name will be attached to mine." "Yes," he said. "You're sure?" "Nora," he said her name quietly, the way he'd said mine weeks ago, handing it back, saying, "You know better. I've been sure since the fence post." She looked at him. He looked at her. I looked at the document on the counter and pretended to be very interested in the territorial court's handwriting. "All right," she said finally, "then we fight it." The fight took 6 weeks and most of Eli's savings. I'm not going to make the legal proceedings poetic because they weren't. They were long and procedural and full of moments where the outcome was unclear, and the only interesting parts were the parts where human beings had to decide what they were willing to do. The lawyer they hired was a woman named Aurelie Portes who worked out of Tucson and specialized in water rights, and had the manner of someone who had been underestimated so many times she developed a productive relationship with it. She was thorough and expensive and worth every cent. The hard part wasn't the legal argument. The hard part was November. November was when the rains came in hard from the south and the creek rose fast, and 3 of Nora's fence sections came down in the lower pasture, and 2 of her cattle got out and one was lost entirely to the rushing water. Eli was out in the rain at 3 in the morning repairing fence line by lantern light, and Nora was beside him, not because she'd asked him to be, but because when he'd gotten up and found his coat in the dark, she'd already been awake, already dressed, already holding a lantern. They worked in the rain for 4 hours. I know this because Sam Ellery told me, and Sam Ellery knew because he'd seen the lantern light from his north pasture and ridden over to check if it was trouble and found 2 people working in the dark with the focused quiet of people who had decided not to count the cost. He said he'd offered to help. Eli had told him they were fine, thank you, go back to sleep. Nora had said without stopping what she was doing, "We've got it, Sam, thank you." We've got it. Sam had ridden home and apparently thought about that all the way back. I thought about it too when he told me. We've got it, such a small thing. 2 words from a woman who'd been saying I've got it for 2 years. Something about those 2 words, the we of them, the casual, confident we, like it was already the most natural thing in the world, said more than the whole of October's decision had. The legal case resolved in December, 10 days before Christmas, in Nora's favor. Orally Porty's was very good. The prior rights claim was determined to be without sufficient historical documentation, and the challenge was dismissed with prejudice, meaning Proulx couldn't refile on the same grounds. He could try other approaches, and he might someday, but for now the water rights were clear and confirmed. Eli came to tell me. He came to Dunbar's on a cold December morning with frost on his coat and sat down across from me and said, "It held." "I know," I said. "I heard from Porty's this morning. She was excellent." "Yes." He wrapped his hands around a coffee cup. He looked tired, the good kind, the kind that has done something worth being tired from. "Caleb," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me honestly." "That's what I do," I said. "Do you think," he stopped, "do you think she'll let me stay, past this, past the fight, now that the reason isn't as urgent?" He looked at me with a frankness that was almost hard to look at. "Or do you think she'll want her space back?" I thought about Nora watching him to the ridge. I thought about "we've got it in the rain." I thought about the specific way she'd said, "We," like it was already the most natural word in the world. "Eli," I said, "I think the question you should be asking isn't whether she'll let you stay. I think the question you should be asking is whether you're ready to stay, whether you're staying for her or for the architecture." He looked at me. "She's not a leaner," I said. "I know that. And this place isn't Colorado." "I know that too." "Then what is it?" He thought about it, seriously, the way he took all the important questions with care without rushing to the easy answer. "It's mine," he said quietly. I don't mean the land, I mean he paused. "The life, the shape of it, our shape." He said the word like he'd been practicing it, like it was a word he'd been afraid of for a long time and was learning to trust. "It's ours." I wrote in my log that night, December 12th. Legal matter resolved, Eli Voss still here, status staying. Didn't cross anything out this time. Christmas came and went the way Christmas does in territory towns. Quietly, with the specific gravity of people who know that sentimentality is a luxury, and who feel it anyway defensively in private moments. Nora cooked a meal. Eli brought firewood and a bottle of whiskey that cost more than it should have. Sam Ellery came with his wife, Clara, and their daughter, who was 7 and had opinions about everything. Dunbar came and brought hard candy and left early to argue with his conscience about something, which was his perpetual condition. I was invited and I went, and I sat in Nora Beckett's kitchen, the kitchen with James Beckett's chair still in the corner that no one sat in, and I watched 2 people navigate the strangeness of sharing a table with someone new. It was not easy. I want to say it was easy because it would be a better story, but it wasn't. There were moments, small ones, quiet ones, when something would shift. Nora would hand Eli the bread basket and their hands would touch, and she would withdraw hers with a speed that was almost involuntary, like a reflex from a place still healing. Eli would look up and something would cross his face, not hurt, exactly, more like patience, the practiced kind, the kind you develop when you've decided that something is worth the time it takes. And then Clara Ellery would say something funny and everyone would laugh, and the moment would pass and they'd be 2 people at a table again, a little closer than before. After dinner, Sam and Clara and their daughter left. Dunbar had gone hours ago. I was helping clear the table, performing the useful invisibility of the extra man when Nora said, "Eli, stay a minute." I left. I don't know what was said. For once in my log-keeping life, I don't know, because I didn't listen at the barn and I didn't linger at the gate, and I rode home in the cold December dark, and I let them have their minute without my attention attached to it. I wrote in my log, Christmas, good enough. January tested everything. January in the Rincon territory is not the gentle winter that Christmas makes people believe in. It is cold in a particular, penetrating way, not the spectacular cold of the northern mountains, but a cold that seeps, that works its way into structures and bodies and arrangements, and finds the places where they weren't built quite right. Eli moved into the house in January. I want to be precise about this too, because precision is what I owe the record. He moved into the house in the sense that he began sleeping in the room that had been the children's room, and I note that Nora offered it and he accepted it, and the offer and acceptance both took considerable courage from people who were still working out what they were to each other. And he took his meals there, and he was the person who banked the fires at night and checked the water supply each morning and knew, without being told, that the east window needed a new seal against the wind. He and Nora lived together the way two people live together when they're both being very careful, which is to say, with tremendous attention to the small courtesies, the way you pass a coffee cup, the side of the table you take without discussion. The particular rhythm of morning and evening that two people develop slowly like a language, not taught, accumulated. I came out twice a week. I told myself it was to check on the water records and help with the freight correspondence. Nora had started doing the books for 2 other homesteads in the area, a small income, using her education, which turned out to be considerable, and I helped with the courier. That was true. But also I came because I wanted to see how this was going, and I was not yet willing to admit that I cared this much. The trouble in January came from a direction I should have seen and didn't. Eli got sick. Chest cold at first, the ordinary kind that January produces. He managed it for a week, working through it with the particular pig-headedness of men who have decided they're not allowed to be anything less than functional. And then on the 8th day it went south and became something else, a fever that climbed in the night and was frightening in the morning. I came out that Wednesday to find Nora in the kitchen in the early dark, making a broth from the last of the stored chicken, and she looked up when I came in with an expression I hadn't seen on her face before. Not fear, not worry, something older than that. How bad? I asked. Bad enough, she said. The fever broke this morning, but it was. She stopped, stirred the broth. It was very high in the night. I sat down. Nora. I'm fine, she said. I didn't ask if you were fine. She looked at me, that still water gaze, and in it I saw something that she usually kept below the surface, the actual depth of it, the actual depth of what she felt when something threatened the thing she'd let herself start to build again. He was talking in his sleep, she said, with the fever talking to a leaner. She said it flatly, factual, the way she said hard things, her name, and then things I couldn't understand, and I sat in the doorway and I thought, her jaw tightened briefly. I thought you knew this was complicated, you knew this was going to cost something. And I said, and I sat in the doorway and I listened to him talk to her and I wasn't jealous. She stopped. I was sad for him, for both of them. For what he lost and for what she lost and for, her voice did the thing it did rarely, that brief crack. For all the things that get taken from people who were just trying to build something. She set the spoon down on the side of the pot. And then I went in and I put a cold cloth on his forehead, she said, because that's what needed to be done. I looked at her for a long time. You love him, I said. She didn't answer right away. I'm in the process of it, she said finally. I think it doesn't feel the way I remember. It's slower, more deliberate, like rebuilding a fence section, not the original construction. She looked at the broth. The original construction was James and I were young and it happened. Fast and certain. This is, she turned the word over. This is chosen, every morning a little more chosen. That's not less, I said. No, she said. It's not. I've decided it's not. Something moved across her face. It took me until 3 in the morning with a fever cloth and an empty house and his voice saying someone else's name to decide that, but I've decided. Eli recovered. He was functional again by the end of the week and furious with himself for having been sick, which was predictable. And Nora was brisk and efficient about his recovery in the way she was brisk and efficient about most things, which he interpreted correctly as the specific form of tenderness, She'd developed for situations where ordinary tenderness wasn't available to her. On the Sunday after his recovery, I was at the house and I saw this. He came in from checking the cattle, moving carefully, still not entirely right, and found Nora at the table going through the account books with the focused concentration she brought to anything numerical. He came in and she looked up, and he stood there for a moment, still in his coat, and said, "I was talking to a leaner in the fever." "I know," she said. I want to," he stopped, tried again. "I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound." "Eli," she set her pen down, "I know it doesn't need saying." "It does," he said. "I was talking to her because I was afraid, I think. When you're that sick and that confused, you go to the most certain thing you know. And she was the most certain thing I knew for a long time." He paused. "But I want you to know that when I woke up, when the fever was down and it was morning and I could think, you were the person I was glad was there. You were the certain thing." His voice was very quiet. "I want you to know that." Nora looked at him. "I know that too," she said. "You do?" "Yes," she picked her pen back up. "Now take your coat off, you're letting the cold in." He almost smiled, the real one this time, not the ghost. He took his coat off. February was when Proul came back. Not with lawyers this time, with a different kind of pressure, the kind that works through community, through reputation, through the slow erosion of options. He started buying up the freight contracts that had been passing through Canyon Dulce to destinations south of Benson, rerouting them through his operation. He made it inconvenient for Dunbars to stay supplied. He made it clear, through intermediaries, that his offer for Nora's water rights was still open, and that the people around her who did business with Proul might find it easier if the matter were resolved. It was not a direct threat. It was the kind of pressure that leaves no fingerprints. I went to Eli with it. He was at the fence line, always at something, Eli, always working. And he listened to what I said, and then he put down his post driver and looked at the mountains for a while. "He's going to keep doing this," he said. "There's no legal argument that stops him from applying pressure. There's no fence we can set that changes the underlying problem. Which is that she's a woman alone on valuable land, and he sees that as an opportunity." He turned the post driver in his hands. "I've been thinking about something for a while. I want to know if you think I'm moving too fast." I raised an eyebrow. "I want to propose a partnership," he said. "Legal and formal, half the land in my name, water rights jointly held, deed restructured to show two owners." He looked at me. "Not because of Proul, because it's what this is, what we are. I want it to reflect what's real." He paused. "But I need to know if I'm assuming something that isn't." "Ask her," I said. "What if she says no?" "Then she says no, and you know where you stand, and you decide from there." I shrugged. "But Eli, I've been watching the two of you for 6 months. I've been watching her watch you when you're not looking. I've been watching you look for her in every room before you look for anything else." I held his gaze. "Ask her." He asked her that evening. I know this because I was in the barn, legitimately this time, repairing a bridle that had broken that morning. And I could hear them on the porch, which was close enough to hear clearly and far enough that I had deniability if pressed. My quirk, remember, I can't help it. "I want to propose a legal partnership," he said. "Formal, the deed, the water rights, everything." A long pause. "That's," she stopped, "Eli. That's a permanent thing." "Yes. It means, legally, it means your name on everything. Your liability, your stake." "I know what it means." "It means," she paused, "it means you're staying." "I mean to stay," he said. "I've meant to stay since November. I needed to say it out loud." He paused. "And there's something else I want to say out loud." "Tell me." He stopped. I heard him organize something. "You told me you were in the process of it, loving me in the process." Another pause. "How did you know I said that?" "Caleb," he said. "Of course," she said. Are you still in the process?" he asked. "Or have you?" "Eli," her voice was soft and direct and certain. "I've been certain since the night of the fever. I've been waiting for you to be certain." "I am," he said. "I am very certain." A long silence. "The partnership," she said finally. "The legal one." "Yes. Yes," she said. "I'll sign." Another silence. Is that all you're saying yes to?" His voice was very careful. No, she said, but the other thing isn't something you say yes to. It's something that, she paused. It's something you keep choosing every morning. I know, he said, I'll keep choosing. I know you will, she said. That's why I'm saying yes to the partnership. I set down the bridle. I didn't need to hear any more. I sat in the barn and listened to the horses move in their stalls and the wind come down off the rinkins, and the low murmur of voices from the porch that I couldn't hear any more, and I thought about the architecture of things. The architecture of lives, how they're built for two and fall apart when one person leaves, how they sit empty for years, wrong-shaped and echoing, and how sometimes, not always, not often, but sometimes, two people find each other whose empty shapes fit. Not perfectly, nothing fits perfectly, but close enough that the wind doesn't come through, close enough to be warm. I went home, wrote in my log. February 18th, partnership proposed, partnership accepted, status settled. I'll finish this account in March, which is when the paperwork was filed and the deed was re-recorded, and orally Porties sent a note saying the transfer was clean and complete and congratulations. I'll finish it with one thing that happened in March that I haven't told anyone else. I was at the house on a Thursday bringing a letter from the Tucson Depot, regular correspondence. Nothing important. And I knocked and nobody answered. And I heard voices from the far side of the house, from the direction of the east pasture, and I went around. They were at the fence line. The east pasture fence that had been the beginning of all of it, the section that had been down the day Eli rode past and saw her setting posts. She was holding a post level. He was driving it. Not because the fence was down. I could see that the fence was in good repair. They were, as far as I could tell, adding a section, extending it, moving the pasture east, claiming more ground. They weren't talking. They didn't need to. I watched them for a moment, this man who had been moving since Colorado, this woman who had been holding things together since February of 1885, both of them now standing at a fence line in the March sun with their hands on the same post. And I thought, this is what it looks like when two broken things become one working thing.